is closed as much as
Okay,
I
good.
am.
Good.
So
Sometimes I've found, depending on people's level of experience or what they've kind of gone through or the challenges that they're facing with their client, sometimes you just have to coach them. It's like, hey, we're all on the same side. Like what you just said, like the reasons for it. You coach that agent to then go and regurgitate that to their
right.
client.
Yeah.
Not to say
And she knows, yeah, well, she knows that too. She really wants this buyer to buy this house. And it's just a matter of kind of, like the buyer went and took his son by the property yesterday, so that the level of interest is there. It's
Sure,
almost just like they're getting kind of cold feet to pull the trigger, you
sure.
know, and overcome those doubts that they think that they're overpaying for a property that if they put the work into it, they're not going to get back.
Well, I never enter in a transaction with the idea that, oh, I can just back out later. But a buyer should rest assured that still has to appraise, still has to pass inspection. I mean, the bank's not going to let you overpay for it,
Right.
right?
And the woman that I'm working with actually she was a mortgage broker for a while before she became an agent. So she so she has experience as far as that goes, and trying to in comfort, or at least reassure that you know, that the property, will appraise for whatever they offer. And,
Sure.
you know, so,
Got it. Got it.
so yeah, so now it's just a waiting game to see if she can convince her buyers this is a good property for them. Because I guess the wife really wants it, but now her talking to the husband was what triggered the uncertainty, as far as like now he's having second thoughts and all that kind of stuff for some reason.
Do you have any additional showings on it scheduled?
I have two today.
Okay. Have you communicated that to the agent already?
I did. I
Okay.
said I have it. And she was like, I'm gonna tell him you have 4 viewings today.
It's a delicate thing. It's
I
a
know,
delicate
right?
thing, right? Because you want it. People want something more when they think other people want it as well.
Right.
There are other people
But
that would get scared off. They're like, I don't
yes,
want to get into a bidding war. I'm out.
yeah, yeah.
Right.
I mean,
So
it's
hopefully
it's
it's
it's a
no, it's
yeah. You tread lightly. Yeah.
Right.
keep the
Well, okay. Keep us updated. Let us know if there's anything you can do. Sorry, I was in bed by the time I got your text last night.
I know, right?
I was
That's
sitting
how
on
it
the
goes.
phone. I was
That's
like,
how it goes, though. You get things after hours and such.
I'm a
Oh,
loser. I'm sitting on my couch watching TV. I was like, I'll call her. Anyway,
um, okay. So we have spent the last 2 sessions really going through a listing presentation, right? And kind of the prep, the prequal, the actually showing up for it, going through the cadence of walking in the home, getting a tour, asking questions and such. I wanted to kind of wrap it up with presenting the comps and talking about value. And okay, so this is not a CMA class. Okay, so if you haven't already, go. There's lots of different videos I think that we have compiled. The most recent one was Stephanie Janiga actually running the CMA. So when you have the opportunity for a listing appointment, your research and such is on the front end, and you're sending that listing package or that pre-listing package, right? Which, if you remember, is simply in my case, is my listing presentation without the comps, right? So I'm not actually sending the client anything with numbers or comparables I'm not going over that with them until we sit down at the home after we toured. Okay. So a situation, I think I've talked about this before. I'm going to pick Angel's brain. Angel had the opportunity to go on a listing appointment, and I'm really proud of her because she didn't get the listing opportunity, which is a real bummer. But I'm proud of her because she kind of wanted me to go with her, and I said no. No, I jokingly, I knew that she was prepared because she really had gone through the comparables and asked the client for some photos. I actually sent her some because they had this really well-to-do basement. So I talked a lot with Angel about going into the listing opportunity with a range, right? So whenever I go into a listing opportunity, I've got a range in mind. And the range is not my opinion. The range is based on the comparables. But where that home fits in the range is dependent on what I see there, right? The condition I see, the updates I see, what it backs up to, all of the factors that a site like Zillow just really can't nail, right? So Angel went in there with a range, right? Or she had a range, and then we talked, and then she went back and she really scrutinized the comparables that we hadn't narrowed down to, and she went in there with a range, and ultimately, you know, her range was right in line with someone else, or with another agent. Sharon, can you take over for a second? I've got a closing in a half hour and they're calling me.
Okay. I don't know about Angel's listing presentation, so I can't continue. But I'll say that did it make you feel good to realize that your numbers were in the same range as somebody else's?
He sold it for my exact number. I said 735, and he texted me a week later and said, I sold it for 735. I said, thank you for using my number and not taking me.
Did you take that opportunity to try and ask him why he chose the agent that he chose?
No, he said he'd get back to me. And
so I have in the past, I don't always get an answer, but even now, like if I don't get something, I will reach out to them and say, listen, I won't say listen, but, you know, in an effort to always improve my skills and do better and as a professional, you know, would you mind sharing with me what the deciding factors were for you in your choice of an agent? And be prepared for whatever they say to you. And some of it might just be fluff because they are uncomfortable. Some of it might be right on. It depends on who you're talking to, but take whatever they say and use that constructively, you know, if you can. It's an uncomfortable question to ask, but it can only help you. It can't hurt you in any way.
Sharon, have you really had to like give someone permission to be honest with you?
Well, is what I just said. Like if I ask them, please can you please tell me so that I can improve it? You know, if that's giving someone permission, then yes.
Yeah.
You know, if I sat there and said, I'm giving you the permission.
I kind of meant like,
you know, but
usually when I ask that question, it's kind of fluff, right? Like you said.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I just always kind of communicate. It's like, listen, I have not gotten to where I am without taking both positive and negative feedback. I promise I won't be offended. It'll make me grow as an agent, as a person. So yeah, sometimes they're just like, oh, you know, it's, you know, we just, you know, felt obligated or felt weird. I've never had anybody be like giving me something that like took me aback, but.
Well, I mean, I asked one person and they said that the person I was up against, who's from our office, said they've got $31 million marketing budget and they do this and that, you know, whatever. And okay. And they sold it for just under what I had said to list it, but they started higher, you know. I say I've let that go, you know, but whatever. I asked and that's what they told me. Okay.
Sure. Okay. So let's dive into this in terms of, I'm going to share my screen. And
what part are we at? They've signed everything?
Essentially. Okay. So let's rewind. You've got an opportunity for a listing appointment. You've done your homework. You've asked some questions in the pre-qual. You've come prepared with actives, pendings, solds, and you've walked in the door, you've toured the property, and you're getting an idea of where this home, based on your research, where this property fits in that range, right? So you're going to be sitting down with them, going over these to educate them, right? Now, this is also an opportunity, depending on the rapport that you've built and whatnot, and how you've read them, to determine how it is that you go through this stuff. Remember, I asked a question when you walk in or when you're talking with the sellers, saying, other than price, is there anything specifically that you'd like to discuss before we get started signing the paperwork? Right? That's an assumptive close, but they're going to be able to tell you, well, you know, I don't know, what do you charge, or what are your experience, or I want to know how you're going to market this home, or we're interviewing a few other people, or we don't know if we're going to sell, or all of these other things that are objections, right? They're objections, but they're opportunities to discuss, to have a dialogue. So not all objections are bad. In fact, I feel more comfortable when someone gives me objections or asks questions than just kind of sits there blank, because at least I'm able to read where they're at, right? And kind of be able to adjust. So if they say no, I mean, other than everything sounds good, great, I've gone over my marketing, you feel comfortable about me, my ability, you've earned their trust at this point, you know, and you're going to discuss their value. You're going to have different disc personalities that are going to, you know, dive into these comps and like analyze it, right? And an engineer is going to, you know, Jordan, he's going to weigh the, you know, the factors. He's going to want to analyze price per square foot. He's really going to dive into the numbers, the square footages and this and that. And you have to be prepared to talk about that. There's going to be someone else who just wants to see the pictures of the comparables. How does this look? How do, you know, like they're a visual type person. They're not as analytical. Then there's other people that are going to just say, just give it to me. Just tell me the price, you know, and that's okay too. Right. I don't want to do whatever it is. I don't want to spend an hour going through if they're not interested. They don't care. They just want it, you know? So my point is you have to be able to pivot a little differently depending on what you've gathered from the person at that time. At that time, you've spent, you know, a fair amount of time on the phone and in person talking about them. You're reading them. How open are they? How straight to the point? How much they like you? How much they trust you? Have you developed that rapport? So that's the time to go over the you know, the numbers, right? And to just, what is the word that I'm trying to use? I'm not determining value. I'm gathering data and helping you interpret it, right? So when someone says, what's your opinion on price? It's not my opinion. Not really. I mean, you know, but ultimately I'm helping you interpret the information that's already out there. Okay. So one of the things that I said earlier or before that I always do, and you can love it or hate it, but I always look at Zillow. I always look at this estimate. I've actually been looking at Redfin and Realtor.com now too, because they have these like automated valuations. And why do I look at that? Is that because that's what the house is worth? Not necessarily, maybe, but I'm looking at it because I know that's what our clients are looking at. So when you ask a client, what were your expectations in price, or what were you thinking? From what your research, right? You're making them, you know, sound like they've done some research. They're probably looking at that and they're probably telling you. So if I go into a listing appointment and my range is 300 to 350 and their estimate says 375, I got to be prepared to talk about proactively why that's not going to happen, why that isn't accurate. On the flip side, if I look at the Zillow, it's 275 and I'm doing my analysis at 3 to 350. Same. I'm going to talk about why a professional opinion, why an interpretation of the data is important and what Zillow is missing in that regard, right? That's an easier conversation to have, but I'm going to be prepared to know. And I'm not going to like print out a sheet and bring it to them. I'm just knowing what it is, so I'm not caught off guard. There's nothing worse than going through pricing saying you think it's worth 350 and then they say, well, Zillow says 375 and you're backtracking, right? So it's part of being prepared. Do you agree, Sharon? Here in mute.
I absolutely agree. And that's the best that you can do, because you may also run into a client where Zillow says 375 and they turn around and say 425. You know, they might be out in the stars, but you can't see that coming necessarily.
Yeah.
But you can see it coming if it's been published somewhere.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to share my screen and I'm going.
We were talking about comps.
Mm-hmm.
I would also, if you can take a quick glance, look for some for sale by owners to see if anything like that has sold in their neighborhood as well, because they're going to know about it, right? Because they live there.
Yep.
And you won't, because it doesn't show up on the MLS. So just a quick cursory for that too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I do, if I have time, right, I've driven through the sub and I've looked for sale by owner signs, because the sellers don't realize or at least they don't really, that their a neighbor can ask whatever they want. So their neighbor's asking 350 doesn't mean they're worth 350. But like Sharon said, if there is any for sale by owners and they've sold, they've taken down that sign, they're not going to be on the MLS, but you should be able to go on Realcom or PRD and look at, a sale recorded, right?
Yeah, PRD takes a while to upload. So
you could try the township or the city records. Yep.
BSA online.
Yep, exactly.
Even does Zillow show you sold?
Not for sale by owners, I don't think.
No, I don't know.
It just, for me, most of the time I've looked at it, just says like listing removed.
Oh, okay.
You're talking about like looking up a specific one that you already saw was for sale by owner, not looking up like all the for sale by owner houses.
No, we're talking about look geographically, like was there any for sale by owner that sold?
Right, but I'm just saying you would have to know the specific address. You're not able to go in PRD and be like, show me all the for sale by owners that sold in this neighborhood.
No.
PRD doesn't update quick enough for you to be able to use that.
Yeah. It's arduous because it's individual, Megan. Yes. You either have to like pull a report and look at, or pull a neighborhood list and look through each one individually, or know an address in order to go in and look. And this is one of the challenges with new construction that's challenging. With new construction, oftentimes the builders don't even list all of the listings on the MLS. So when an appraiser or when one of us is looking at comps, if nothing's not recorded, but if nothing was listed and then subsequently sold, they're not typically showing up in a report. Okay. So if you know that your competition, for instance, someone was talking, Michelle she was going through a CMA for a newer built home. Let's say there was still a builder building in the area, but you didn't know, you might have to visit that builder's office or like do more research to find out what the most recent sales have been that have closed if they weren't listed on the MLS. Okay. And that's important stuff to know. It's also very important then to convey to an appraiser as well, because appraisers have a tough job, but they're also kind of lazy, in my opinion. They're not going into a builder's office and asking this. They're just pulling a report from MLS and they're picking a few and they're going through it, right? So if you, to support your case, right, be prepared to meet the appraiser, give them some research that you've done, okay? So I'm going through the CMA right here that I pulled for a property that I did. Now, I'm not going to spend a bunch of time going through how to do this. Does everyone know how to do this view, though? Maybe I should.
I've only ever done the other one.
Okay. Let me just search or do it real quick then. So when you do a search, right, you can save a search.
Yeah.
And for instance, this is, sorry. Okay. So I've done a search here and I saved that search. This isn't a search for like an auto email or anything like that to a client. This is just, I did a search for a CMA and then I saved it. So I do a bunch of search and then I click here and then I go save and then I go new save search and I name it something. That way it's always there for me, right? To go back to. Now the thing is it updates in real time, right? So if you had a property that's active and then all of a sudden it gets pending or sold, it's going to update. So it's not stagnant like it would be saving a PDF. Does that make sense? But it's easy to go back to reference. So once I have my search that I wanted, and I'm looking for actives, I'm looking for pendings, I'm looking for solds, and I'm kind of analyzing these, maybe a few of them I'm going to refine and I'm going to discard them because they don't fit my search. Maybe I'm going to do that. But once I have this list of the ones that I want, right? So in this case, 21 of them, some actives, accepting a backup offer, a few pendings, and a bunch sold. That's for me more than enough for a CMA. I'm going to select this. That's going to select all of them. And I'm going to do actions, CMA. Okay. I know people also do like print the CMA, but this is just how I do it. Click there, click CMA, and it's going to take me to this screen. I can actually assign it to a contact. I can write a description, but I typically don't do that. I just jump right to the pages and I select what pages that I want to be included in this. All of these can be minimized. I always do, if you do the cover sheet, it's going to do a blank photo. So I just started, I always do to the map, CMA map layout. This is what I do first. And then I do the summary of comparable listings. And then I typically do either a pro report or I will separately print off the fulls for the most closest CMAs. Son of a bitch. Hold on. Sorry, guys. Hey, Steve. Yes, it is. It is.
Are you guys using your personal phone, or do you have work personal? You are using personal. Mm-hmm. Right. I have to turn it off at like 9:30. I'm like, leave me alone. Wow.
Sorry, guys. I had to step away for a second, and I see Matt had to just jump on the phone.
Yeah.
And he's sharing his screen, so it's not much I can do about that. So he's showing you how to choose what pages to put on there.
Yeah.
So
I'm back. Sorry, guys.
it's okay.
Okay, so I'm just going to hit right here. There's a lot of different stuff you can do. I don't do them. There's probably some value in there. So if you research it and you look into it, cool. If not, this is enough for me. I go to finish. You can view the CMA and it'll open up as a PDF. You can also email it. And then this little disk, that's a hard disk for anyone who's younger than 30. You can save it. You can save it. And then it's going to be saved to whatever on that start page that you had called it. So when you go to my RCO, it's going to show up under my CMA. So that's how you can save them.
But
Now,
it doesn't save it to your download folder and on your actual computer. It's saving it within RealComp.
correct. So this is how you do that on your download. Under finish, you just click View CMA. It's going to pull it up. It's a PDF that you can save. So this is a PDF. So I always leave these open on my computer. That way, depending if I'm printing them out or I have them, if I don't have internet, I can just open up my computer and it's there, right? You can save it on your desktop. So this is what it essentially looks like, okay? And again, if you don't like the order of these pages, you just exit out of it, go back to pages and move them around. You can hit here. Oh, I want that at the bottom, or I want that at the top, whatever. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is essentially what it shows. So it's not super fancy in terms of like colors and design and stuff, but I don't really care. The first page, because I wanted that map layout, it's going to show all of the properties, right, that are on there, where they are in the map, and then labeled by the address. Sometimes this is beneficial because someone says, where is that one at? Right? And you don't know, especially if you don't know the neighborhood too well. You're like, oh yeah, it's over there north of 75, blah, blah, blah. And if these were not as spread out, this obviously would be zoomed in. So if you're looking at one specific neighborhood, it'd be a little bit more, concise. This is going to give me a list of all of them. It's going to group them by status. Okay. So when I'm doing a CMA right now, I'm looking at, in addition to active and pending and sold, I've recently started adding accepting backup offers as well as coming soons. Why would I do that? Well, accepting backup offers is basically a pending, and a coming soon is basically an active. So rather than not have them on my radar, I'd rather have them on here, and I can talk about what that means with them. Okay. Who's watched the Ben Kinney listing presentation video? Lachey, Jordan?
Half of it. Yeah.
Okay, good. Was it beneficial?
It's very good.
He's a very different type of guy than a Cody Gibson.
Yeah.
He's just a normal dude, self-admittedly. And he just has a way of talking that I think a lot of people just really is plain common sense that makes a lot of sense. It's sales, but it's not full of cheesy one-liners and such. So for me, I really see benefit in it. But what he talks about in terms of the conversation is, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, these are the active listings. These are our competition. If we went on the market today, this is what we would compete with. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, these are the pending listings. These are the properties that have beat us to a contract. Well, what does that mean? Well, they've gone on the market before us and they've already found a buyer. These are really important for us to keep an eye on, because these properties, although we know what they were listed at and how long it took for them to go under contract, we don't ultimately know what they're going to close at yet. So the most important for us to really analyze are the solds. The solds are what other buyers, or what buyers, other agents, and appraisers are going to use to justify our sales price. So I like that line because it makes it resonates with me, and I think I can then talk about what that means. Because at the end of the day, anyone can ask whatever they want. Doesn't matter. All that matters in terms of value, and all an appraiser is going to use, is what's sold. Now, that doesn't mean you don't take these things into consideration, right? Because maybe everything that's sold is sold for 500, yet now everything that's on the market's under 400 and it's sitting for a long, long time. I mean, that means the market is going in a different direction, right? So it's important to know how to basically talk about this data here. And that's what we're going to talk about next, okay? After that is this pro report, which does a little bit of the little sample of each of those listings that's above, gives a little exterior photo. What I really then like to supplement with this is the most comparable homes that I can find. I mean, I'm talking apples to apples, square footage, bedrooms, baths. I'm going to print a full, or have it pulled up on my computer, a full layout with those, so I can actually show how do all the listing photos look. So I can pull up and say, how does that kitchen compare to your kitchen? Okay, check box in yours for stronger. How does that backyard compare to your backyard, right? So we can really dial in an apples to apples comparison, okay? So this is the overview, and then you get in the nittier grittier with some of the comparables. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So I'm going to talk about this like to a seller. I'm going to say, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, it's important to determine value, to look at what else is on the market as well as what is sold. This is pretty overwhelming for someone who's not an analytical brain to look at. So what are we looking at here? Well, we're looking essentially at a list of all of the properties that are currently on the market, that are currently pending, and that have sold in the past whatever. Okay, I typically use 180 days. Now, you could use whatever you want, but depending on how many results you have, you might want to narrow it down. I'm also going to communicate to the seller what other criteria that I'm using for this. Maybe it's, well, these are all ranch homes within 2 miles, or these are all 3-bedroom houses in the same neighborhood, or these are only 4 bedrooms plus within the same school district, or whatever other criteria that you've used to narrow down this list. Okay. So why I say that is because not every house is on here, right? If they might say, well, my neighbor's house isn't on here. Well, there's a good reason for that. It's not a comparable home, right? It might be in your same neighborhood, but it's a colonial and you have a ranch. So I've chosen to include only ranches. Why did I do that? Well, it's because that's essentially what an appraiser is going to do. Okay. So in this regard, we've got 4 groups of properties: accepting backup offers. Can anyone communicate to me what accepting backup offers means?
But they have, sorry,
You can go ahead.
Go ahead.
they have received an offer, but if anything happens to this one, it doesn't go forward.
Change the word received.
They have accepted
Correct.
an offer, and they're accepting backup offers in case this one doesn't go forward.
Got it. So if I wrote an offer and they are accepting backup offers, then I could write a better offer than what they currently have, and the sellers would be able to cancel that one and take ours?
No.
No. Okay, good. That was a trick question. So
Hmm.
essentially, while the buyers are still in some sort of contingency period, they can accept a backup offer, and meaning that we'll be in second place should a mutual release be signed with that first one. This is different. Yeah, go ahead.
So if you put in an offer on an ABO and then you find another house and you put an offer in that, do you have to rescind the other one?
You should. Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
What I was going to say is, yeah, you should rescind it just so the other agent knows about it. But don't mistaken that with being contractually bound to that backup offer. Because until an offer is fully executable, right, bottom lined by everybody, you're not contractually bound to it. Just to make that distinction clear.
Yeah.
Yes, etiquette, you should tell them.
Yeah. So one thing that you'll see if you're searching for properties is CCS. And CCS is contingent continue to show. And that is different than accepting backup offers, because the designation for CCS means that the buyer or the seller has accepted an offer from the buyer contingent upon the sale or the closing of their current home, and that there is a 48 or a 72-hour first right of refusal in place. What does that mean? So if a property status is CCS and my buyers are interested and they submit an offer, if that offer would be acceptable to those sellers, the sellers have to provide the current buyer that's under contract with them in writing a first right of refusal, meaning that they either have to terminate or release, right? Terminate the contract, or they have to waive or satisfy their contingency, meaning that sale is no longer contingent upon the sale of their home. So it's like shit or get off the pot, and what that means, and every situation is different. I know what our 48, 72-hour contingency period looks like. Not everyone's reads the same. So you would want, if you have a buyer, you would want to know from that listing agent, what does that agreement look like, right? How long do they have, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Can I ask a question, Matt?
Of course.
So ABO, if I'm a buyer coming in and placing an offer when it's ABO status, I'm banking on something falling apart because of the inspection or financing, pretty much, right?
Yeah.
Not like they can't do that and have that be the contingency, right? If it was a contingency, it has to be the CCS.
Per our MLS rules, it should be.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, there's also situations where I've seen it negotiated into a contract that a buyer's offer is being accepted contingent, where the seller says, well, I want to keep it as active, the status. And they could have this like side agreement. However, that's technically breaking the MLS rules that we have in place. There's nothing worse than me showing a property that says active, only find out they already have an accepted offer on it or a contingent offer or something.
That happened to me on Tuesday.
It sucks.
So I was showing a house in Plymouth Township, $500,000 house, not nothing. And I looked up the seller's disclosures. To be prepared, there was an assessment on there. I reached out to the listing agent just to clarify what the assessment meant, right? Because I knew my clients would ask me about it. He says, oh, we accepted an offer and we're having the inspection today, but come look at it anyway. Cause I have never had a easy time with inspections. So we went and looked at it anyway, because my client just wanted to see what you can get for your dollar. But had I not known that, what if they would have fallen in love with it, right?
Yep.
Should have been marked accepting backup offers. He didn't, because he knows that a lot of people aren't going to go look at it.
Yeah. But he still gets buyer leads.
Potentially, yeah. Right? Off of Zillow and all that kind of stuff, for sure.
Yeah. So
well, I have a question about the accepting backup offers and the coming soon, because I don't necessarily like them. So I don't know what the benefit of them, obviously for a listing agent, coming soon, it puts like a little bit of, pressure, like this is coming soon. And a lot of times in their remarks or whatever, it'll say like, calling highest and best, whatever. So they're trying to basically create this like sense of urgency.
Mhm.
But for accepting backup offers, I really don't. I don't like it. I don't know why. Because I don't know. Like, what is obviously?
Well, let me tell you a story. This top one, that's my listing. It's under accepting backup offers, and it's only on here because the status has been changed subsequently from this. So, that's why it's showing up here. This is the house I did the CMA on. But my point is, I accepted an offer on it, but it was contingent upon their inspection. I marked it to accepting backup offers. I got a backup offer on it, and guess what happened? The first one terminated yesterday. So we're going back to that backup today. So in this regard, if I would have just marked it pending and then gone back on the market, it would have probably raised a whole bunch of questions, and it would have stopped showings, stopped any other interest or offer. So for my sellers, it's beneficial.
Oh, sorry. From a buyer's perspective, I mean, I guess that worked out for the second person. But it just seems like a lot to say, okay, well, if something goes wrong, then you'll be like, I mean, I guess that if they fell in love with the house, it makes sense.
Right.
But
just think about someone who keeps losing out on offers.
Right.
They may want to be first in line if something else falls apart. So Matt, what are your thoughts on how to read the timeline activity of a property that goes to accepting backup offers and then comes off, rather than being pending and coming off? Right? You look at a 2-week timeline where something's off the market and back on, it's the inspection.
Yeah, typically it's some sort of part in the due diligence. Right. So when we say inspection period, I like to say due diligence, because remember, it's not just about the inspection, right? Yes, that is the time to do it, but it's also the time for a buyer to review the HOA docs. What school district is this in? What specific schools?
Is there?
Yeah. What is does that train that's behind it? How often does that run? They have the ability during their period of time, their due diligence time, to really back out for any reason, right, that they want. Maybe they want to, see what the utility bills are, whatever reason. So yes, if it comes off the market or goes pending or goes ABO and then comes back to active within, 6 to 10 days, it's probably because of something regarding due diligence. Could be also cold feet, right? If it's longer than that, I typically think it's something regarding financing. If I see one that was on the market for 400 and then 25 days later comes back on at like 375, I'm thinking to myself, it was a low appraisal, right? So when I'm going to fast forward a little bit. So if I'm explaining this to a seller, right, I'm going to disregard this one because, again, it's my listing. But if I'm going to start talking about these, I'm going to say, these are the addresses, right? Now, 2 jump out at me, right? And you're going to have to note this, make mental notes when you're doing your comps. These 2, what about these 2 are something that would be kind of a red flag or something worth discussing?
No address.
Yeah, no address. So what does that typically mean?
One looks like an empty lot.
Could be an empty lot, could be new construction, right? Could be a to be built. And the reason I bring that up is because if I'm really analyzing how long it's taking for houses to sell, and I'm going to share with them a property that's just dirt, that's been on the market, or even a home under construction, but they've had it listed since it was dirt, it's going to skew the numbers a lot. Now, it's still important to know, what are they asking for it? What's the square footage? What's all of that? But I'm not really going to pay much attention to the days on market because it's an anomaly. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's probably the case with both of these, right? So if this is like a to be determined or a lot, whatever, and I see a listing, how many buyers have you had that like want to see a house? It turns out it's not an actual house yet. I would call the listing agent. I would find a little bit more. Is that just the base price? Is that the all-in price? Could a client actually build it for that? What's the timeline? Have they started on it? All those kind of questions. Okay, especially if I don't have a lot of competition to analyze. I really want to know what's going on with those, because maybe that's unrealistic. Maybe that home is actually going to be over 500 because that's the base. It's important to understand. So I'm going to analyze these. I'm going to tell you this is what the asking price is. And again, anyone can ask anything that they want. But if something's been on the market for, you know, a reasonable amount of time, you know, it's worth noting. How many showings have they had? What's the activity? What do they look like? If I have time, I'm going to go preview it myself. I want to know what my competition looks like. This is the type of stuff that your sellers rather will beat you up on because they know what else is on the market. They don't analyze this as much. They're going to want to talk about how nice their home is compared to what else is on the market. So if you already see a home that's listed for $450, it's been on the market for a long time, and they think theirs is nicer than that, you're going to have a heck of a hard time talking about how your house is not worth more than that, right? And putting together the pieces of that conversation. So do your research ahead of time. The bedrooms, the bathrooms. Now this I hate. I don't know about Sharon, but this bugs me. So in realtor world, why don't we do 2.5 or 3.5? Well, because in realtor world, the first number is full baths. The second number is half baths. For instance, my house personally, I have a 2.2. I have 2 full baths and 2 half baths. But when you do these averages, it really skews it because it doesn't do the math right. Like you can't have 7 half baths. Does that make sense?
You can, but
well, you could. That'd be weird. So, you know, you could round up to say, hey, the average is just under 4 bedrooms, but this one you kind of have to be able to communicate that. Yeah. Whether they tell you or not, they're not going to understand until you explain that. Average square foot, average lot size, the status date. So that's the last time it had a status change. The price per square foot that they're asking, right? Cumulative days on market and average days on market. Cumulative and average are different because maybe a property was taken off and put back on. If a property is not taken off for 30 days or more, it's not going to reset. So I really focus on the cumulative. Like for instance, this one says 43. This one says 17. So they probably went off and went back on. This cumulative doesn't stop ticking. Okay. So these are active. This is our competition, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. It's important to understand what, you know, when we go on the market, this is what other people that are looking for a similar home are going to be seeing. So we want to fit in with this. We don't want to be the highest. We don't, you know, being the lowest, there's some benefit to it. I think we'd get immediate attention, blah, 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 blah. Pendings are what the properties that have beat us to market. What does that mean? Well, they've gone under contract. Ultimately, we don't know what they've gone under contract for. We can make some assumptions, but we ultimately don't know. How can we make some assumptions? Well, if a property was listed at $370 and went on the market or went pending after only 5 days, is it safe to assume that that property, if it closes, is probably going to sell for that or perhaps even more?
I would think so.
Yeah. And in fact, you could look at that listing and probably see in the agent remarks if they called for highest and best. So then you could communicate this property had multiple offers. I would also, and not every agent does this, but I would also call these these listing agents. Hey, congratulations on your listing on Deer Ridge. It was looks like a great house. No surprise it sold really quickly. Hey, I'm doing a CMA for a home that is comparable, and I just could you tell me what you ultimately went under contract for? And then I just shut up. Sometimes they tell you, sometimes they don't. This goes back to one of the cardinal rules that Sharon and I talk about, which is being a good agent to other agents, being the type of agent where people feel comfortable sharing this kind of information. So they're not entitled to tell you any of this, but if you won't know unless you ask. Now, if this property that was listed at $429,900, this was on the market for 31 days. I mean, I don't know what it's went under contract for. Maybe they haven't had appraisal yet, whatever, but it might have gone for less than that. Now, if this one said 150 days, probably went for less than that. You know, does that make sense? Yes, say yes.
Yes.
Ultimately, the most important thing is the solds, right? The most important thing is the solds, because those are homes that have gone under that have gone on the market, been exposed to all the buyers out there, have gone under contract, appraised and closed. Now, just because it's sold for 372 doesn't mean it appraised for 372. Meaning it could have appraised for 370 and the seller or the buyer brought in 2K to cover the difference, ultimately settling on 372. But it's a comp because it closed at that. Does that make
And
sense?
once it closes at that, yeah, it becomes a comp for the next property.
Yes.
So for our purposes, yeah, I mean, that's what
Now-
the next appraiser is going to use.
Now, the one caveat to that is that if this says sold for 372, you could go in and the sold, you could see, was there any concessions? You know, maybe there was $5,000 concessions. An appraiser is going to look at that and basically say this house sold for 367. They're going to take into consideration concessions because it affects the net. Yeah, go ahead.
So if you're calling the pending listing, would you be careful about showing? So if the guy says, "Well, what address are you doing?" Would you be careful about showing that with him because
none of your
business?
business.
Yet, so.
None of your business.
Okay.
In a politeful way, it would go something like this: "Hey Phil, Matt Marsupial of Keller Williams Advantage. Congratulations on your listing at Deer Ridge Drive. Looked like a great house. No surprise it sold really quickly. Hey, I'm doing a CMA for a comparable property, and I was just curious if you would be able to tell me what you went under contract for."
Well, yeah. What's the address of the property you're doing that?
Oh, it's in a subdivision a couple doors down, but it's similar home. Did you get full asking?
Yeah, pretty close. Pretty close.
Okay, awesome. Has it already appraised?
No, we're still waiting for that.
Okay, so you're still waiting on appraisal. Okay, do you know when the appraisal is scheduled?
Let me see here. I think next week.
Okay, great. Would it be okay if I reached out to you after the appraisal is done? You'd feel more comfortable telling me that number?
Yeah, sure. That'd be fine.
Okay, great. Awesome. Appreciate your time. You don't have any other listings coming up in the area, do you?
Working on it.
Okay, awesome. Well, maybe I'll reach out to you in a couple of weeks and see if the appraisal is completed on that, and if you have anything else in the pipeline that I could bring some buyers to. I appreciate your time. Thanks so much, Phil.
Thank you.
Is that something you could do?
Mm,
Yeah, I think so.
Quite honestly, I've never had anyone actually ask me for the address. So I could see someone doing it, but I really haven't had it.
Trying to steal your listing.
Yeah, well, I'd be especially careful when you talk about listings before it's signed. I've made that mistake. So the most important are the solds. Why are they the most important? Because they've gone under contract, they've closed.
Say it again, Matt.
What's that?
What'd you say? Be careful to talk about your listings.
Yeah. Talk about a
because-
listing, spend money on photos and video before it's signed. Yep, made that mistake.
Okay. Mhm.
But this is the most important, and we're going to analyze this really hard. And out of these listings, I'm going to try to find the most comparable to ours in terms of beds, baths, and that's where I'm going to dig into like the photos and such. You can't really go through a property that's sold, right? You can't tour it. You can't bring the seller through it, your seller through it. So you really have to utilize the photos. So I'll do the full printout, right? With the large color photos. I'll either print it or bring it on my computer, right? Because the old listing photos, they don't get deleted. So we'll go through and how does this compare to yours? And how does this compare to yours, right? So we're basically building a pros and cons list. So if I'm going through and comparing a 500,000 and all of these things are very comparable in many different ways, it's safe to say that that's where our value is, right? So I'm going to go in to a listing appointment with that range, and depending on what I see with it, it's going to kind of narrow into that range. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So this is a real CMA that I did, and I ended up analyzing all of this data, and we listed at $500,000, and we got 2 full price offers. One fell apart. It's a good thing I had the backup, but that's where I fell.
Can I ask you a question about that backup offer?
Yeah.
So what is your obligation in presenting a backup offer to the seller before the other one fell apart?
As soon as I received that backup offer, I presented it to my seller. I said, we have a backup offer. Here's the pros and cons of it, just like any other offer. And he said, okay, it's not ideal because it's contingent upon the close of their home, but it's good to have as leverage against the first one.
Okay.
So if
Because
that one,
if we go pending, we're not allowed to present anymore, correct? Or per Pete?
you're not obligated to present anymore.
Okay.
I think that would be the term that you would use.
Okay.
Nor would I if I was representing a buyer submit an offer on a pending property. If it came back on the market, cool, then I would put it on.
Right. Okay.
All right, I got a phone call coming up. Is there any, Sharon, you got some parting thoughts you could impart on people? We're at 12.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I know that Rob is starting a class right now on KW models, which I think would be great if anybody's got the time to go through it, because that's a lot of the MREA stuff. I learned a lot when I really dug into that last year as far as profitability, right? And how to discipline yourself and separate your money when you get it, put it into different buckets. And you will find that you have more money than you think when you discipline yourself like that. So that's my plug.
Sharon?
Yes, ma'am. Who's
Can
talking?
we, I know Matt has to go, but after, can I just borrow you for 5 minutes?
Of course. Yeah, no problem. We can stay on.
Okay.
So, all right. So this portion is complete. I'm going to stay on and chat with Lachey for a couple minutes. And I would encourage you, if you've got the time, to jump onto Rob's training that's going on right now. It would be very useful if you haven't attended it yet. Okie dokie.
Thanks, guys. Nice
Bye.
meeting you.
Bye.